Welcome. It's Facts You Don't Know. If it's your first time here and you want to find out new facts that will definitely make you smarter and more, well, and first make sure to subscribe and activate the notification bell so you don't miss anything.
Nurse saves the life of a street child without knowing what it would become. Patricia was a nurse who took care of street children who came to the foundation where she was working in the town of Toledo in Spain. She was in charge of providing care and first aid for those children and people who came looking for help. For her, it was very sad to see how thousands of children passed through this foundation asking for help, but did not ask to be left there. They only came to this site to receive medical help or something to eat, and they continued on their way. There in this foundation, she met Luis Mari. She volunteered for a long time, but did not return as her son passed away with a terrible illness. So the pain of her son's departure kept her from volunteering. One day, a very thin child arrived at that foundation, almost in a state of malnutrition, very ill. The child was very sick. He needed immediate medical help. Patricia, when she saw this child, who was only 6 years old and who had lived on the street for 2 years, gave him the necessary care. But the boy was very delicate. He needed a lot of attention. By telling them that it had lasted just one more day, he would have died. Patricia dedicated a lot of time and care to this child because she sensed that if the proper care was taken, this child could die. Patricia spent entire nights helping this minor. Whole weeks with him. The companions told him to go for a rest, that he was already well, that if he did not rest, the patient would be her. Patricia was determined to take care of this child until he was well. As this dying child slowly opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was Patricia, taking care of him. So he was taking a great liking to that nurse. After a month of being convalescent, he began to show improvement. After a month and a week, this child was already eating alone and talking. Patricia approached him and asked, "And what is your name? Where are your parents? Why do you live on the street?" The boy said, "My name is Adrian. I'm 6 years old, and I don't know where my parents are. The only thing I remember is that we went out to the park one day, and since then I've not seen them again." Patricia, somewhat dismayed by the story she was told, continued to inquire, "Adrian, and tell me, where are you living? Who gives you food? Where did you sleep?" Adrian kept responding to the person who saved his life. "I lived close to this place. The truth is, I slept where they took me the night. Food was obtained by garbage cans, or there are days when people were moved and gave me coins, or in the corner store. The man gave me some cookies. It's not every day, but it's from time to time." Patricia, worried and sad about the life of this child, and at the same time worried about her future, asked, "Adrian, wouldn't you like to get a family again?" Adrian, thinking about the beautiful memories he had lived with his, but that he no longer had, said, "Of course I would like to sleep in a warm bed again and have breakfast with eggs. Of course I do." Patricia, at that moment, she remembered Luis Mari, her old partner. He picked up the phone and called her. He told her to meet, that he was asking her for coffee, that he needed to tell her something important. Luis Mari agreed to meet Patricia when they met later to give each other a big hug. Patricia asked her, "How did you feel after 2 years after your son left?" Luis Mari replied that time passes, but that the wound did not heal. Patricia, who'd noticed that Adrian was at the age at which his friend's son had died, proposed to Luis Mari that why not adopt this child who needed help and could help him with his son's grief. Luis Mari told him to let her think, that he'd give her an answer soon. A couple weeks passed and Luis Mari called Patricia. He said that he'd thought about it very well and wanted to help adopt this boy. Then he met Adrian. Luis Mari adopted him, and in this way, Adrian could count on a family again. He was very grateful with life and with Luis Mari. He knew how to take advantage of all the opportunities that came from that moment. For his part, Luis Mari saw his son reflected in Adrian. So she became a real mom to this. He finished elementary school and started high school. Adrian turned out to be a dedicated student. But above all, he asked his mother, how was her friend Patricia, the nurse who saved her life? Luis Mari said, "Do you remember her?" To which he replied, "Of course I do. How can I not remember the person who saved my life?" Time continued to pass. Adrian finished high school with very good grades. So Luis Mari asked him what career he wanted to study, to which Adrian replied that he wanted to study medicine. And since Luis Mari looked at the grades he had at school, he decided to support him. Also because it happened that this was what his son wanted to study before he had died. And somehow, he saw his son's dreams reflected in Adrian. So he started studying medicine. The first semester went wonderfully. The second, third, and fourth, he finished them with honors. And this was the case throughout the career. He had no problem and managed to graduate. Adrian became quite a surgeon. He helped thousands of people in need and was employed by one of the clinics in the city. Adrian was one of the best in his specialty. He went on to specialize in an open heart surgery. He was wanted by different entities to carry out this type of operation, since almost all of them were a success. He, being a professional, never stopped being who he was. To his mother, Louise Mary, who was not his genetic mother, but was the one who gave him the opportunity to live. She bought him a beautiful house in gratitude for the efforts she made to get him to study. One day he went to visit the foundation where Patricia worked, which even after so long continued to provide support. When this prestigious doctor arrived, the admired and surprised people said, "Go on, doctor. How can we help you, doctor?" To which he, with a smile, asked them to please let Patricia know that he'd come to visit her. Patricia finished healing some people on the streets who were being cared for by her at the time. As she finished her work, she went out to see who was the person who needed her. Adrian, who remembered very well who Patricia was. When he saw her, he handed her a bouquet of flowers that he bought and said, "Hello, Patricia. How have you been? Here I brought you this little gift." Patricia, surprised and flushed, said, "Thank you very much for the flowers, but who are you?" Adrian, who had a good sense of humor, replied, "I am a secret admirer," and smiled at her. Patricia, even more flushed, told him, "Tell me the truth, because I don't think you're my admirer. I've been with you for more than 20 years. You're like my son," and she smiled too. Adrian took her by the hand and said, "Believe me, I am an admirer of yours, but not as a woman, but as a person. I admire you too much, and you don't know how much. So come on, I'll invite you to lunch so we can chat for a while." Patricia, even more confused because she did not know who this character was, accepted the food so as to not be left with the doubt of knowing who the man was. When they arrived at that very fine restaurant, Adrian proposed to Patricia that since she was in charge of health at that foundation, she receive a full supply for the infirmary to change all the utensils that needed to be replaced. Patricia asked him why he did that, and he introduced himself. He said, "Look, Patricia, my name is Adrian, and I'm the surgeon at the clinic in the city, and thanks to you, I could be who I am." Patricia didn't understand what was happening and asked again who he was, to which Adrian said, "Look, Patricia, when I was a child, you helped me in this place, and thanks to you, I did not die. Apart from everything, as if it were not enough. Thanks to your help, you gave me a home with Louise Mary." Patricia at that moment understood who it was. She got up from the table and gave him a big hug, and Adrian, in gratitude to her and that foundation, fully endowed that infirmary, and he gave Patricia a good reward for her work. Thanks for watching. Please like and share the video in social networks. We'll be right back to you as fast as we can.